Have you ever thought about getting into private money lending and then you had an epiphany like, oh my gosh, there's so many things that could go wrong with this. And you're right, there are a lot of things that can go wrong with private money lending. So we're gonna talk about the 5 terrible habits that kill private money lending deals. Now, this is really a 2-part video. So there's actually 10 terrible habits, but we're gonna talk about the first 5 now, and then in the next one, we'll talk about the next 5. There's an escalation to this. So the thing is, private money lending can really change your financial future if it's done right, because the wrong move could really cost you thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so I've seen some of these habits happen to people, and so I'm telling you about them now so that you don't make the same mistakes and build that same bad habit, okay? So, got my notes here. All right, so the first one is lending without collateral. Now, this is referred to as an unsecured loan. And honestly, it's very common, even not in the private money lending industry. I'm sure you're very familiar with unsecured loans. Like if you have a credit card, really that's an unsecured line of credit, right? So they're not asking you to pledge any collateral or anything. They're not putting a lien on your house or anything like that. That is an unsecured loan. So if you don't pay the credit card, then they can send it to collections, or they can sue you or whatever, but they can't actually take any of your possessions. So I've seen private money lenders do some of these loans without putting any collateral in place, meaning they're not using the borrower's assets to protect their financial interest in the loan. This is very common in the beginning when they're so excited and when they want to get their first deal done, and it seems like maybe not such a big deal, or maybe they think it's not that big an amount of money, and so they don't feel comfortable going through the steps required to secure the loan, and so they don't do it. And then the borrower's late, they start getting worried, and they realize like, wait, what recourse do I actually have if I haven't secured the collateral, right? Or rather, if I haven't secured the loan. And so this comes up, and it's very avoidable, right? Like you can actually take care of this on the front end. If you try to take care of it on the back end, in many states, you may have to actually get that borrower's permission. You have to agree to place that lien on their property. So why even go through that when you can just do it on the front end before you even close, right? Second thing I see is skipping the due diligence phase altogether. Now, people will say they're doing due diligence, but really they're just kind of, having a conversation with the borrower or looking at the surface level of the transaction and not really digging into the background of the property, if it's real estate based, or the background of the company, looking at their numbers. They're not truly doing due diligence and underwriting the loan the way that it would be done at like an institution. And I mean, part of that is some of the benefits of being a private money lender, like you have that flexibility, but you are putting your money at risk, so it's in your best interest to do good underwriting. It's not something that should be skipped. Now, one of the third things I see is not using written contracts. Now, naturally, this would irritate me, since contracts is what I do for a living. It is not too difficult to get contracts in place. I mean, you can pay an attorney, you can pay a private lending law firm. There are even softwares that can give you templates that you can use for your loan documents. There's really no excuse not to do the written contract, but it's very common. People do it all the time. They just give the money and there's nothing written down, so there's no record that there was anything talked about this. There was no record that we agreed on terms or anything. They just send the money, no contract. Honestly, it may take you a lot of time in the beginning to draft a contract, but the more you do it, the easier and faster you get, and you can always just pay an attorney to do this for you. You can even pass that cost on to the borrower, right? So if you really think about it, the risk of not having one, and some of those risks are lack of enforceability of your terms, You can have a lack of clarity. So like you can end up in a he said, she said situation, which is super preventable if everything's written down. Now the risks of that happening versus the time it's gonna take to get a written agreement in place. I mean, personally, I would just get the written agreement in place, but you know, I'm biased. Another thing that I see is giving loans to family and friends without clear boundaries and without treating them as if they were a regular client. So I actually see this a lot. I see people giving loans to family members, even though those family members are running businesses. So they're still loaning to a business entity, but that entity is controlled by a family member or friend. Now, I'm not saying that you should never loan to a family member or friend or their entity. What I'm actually saying is there's a lack of clarity regarding the relationship and how things will go sometimes when loaning to family and friends or their entities. So family, friends, they should not get special treatment, right? So if you have your borrowers go through a certain application process, if you run a credit check, if you ask for certain documentation, I would ask for those same things with family and friends and make it clear that this is a business transaction. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm not giving you a discount. Like, this is how it goes, and you're not getting special treatment because you're a family or friend, you know what I mean? And I think that kind of clarity and boundary setting is what can prevent a lot of the taking advantage of people that I see, or entitlement. That's when I see a lot, like family and friends feeling entitled to certain treatment or preferential treatment, really, because they're family and friends. So I think if you're upfront about that in your process, then you can set the expectations. And you know, if you have things written down, and you have to also know like what kind of person you are, right? Because you could actually do great due diligence, have all the boundaries laid out, have written agreements, place the, you know, use title and escrow, put a lien on the property, whatever. But if at the end of the day, you actually are not comfortable enforcing those tools against your family member or friend, it's useless. So you have to know yourself as well. Like, am I the type of person who will advocate for myself even against a family member or friend in the event something goes wrong? Think about that. Okay, the fifth thing is failing to record the lien on the property, especially in real estate. Now, the best and most efficient way to not skip this step is to properly use your team, right? So if you have a escrow company on your team, if you have a good title company on your team, they should be involved pretty early in the process, and this would be something you wouldn't skip, right? Because you'd be getting that preliminary title report. You know, the escrow instructions would be sent. Everyone would understand the conditions for the money or the funds to be released from escrow, et cetera, et cetera. So if you are using your team members properly, there shouldn't be an issue with the lien not being recorded. I actually read an article recently, and I made a video about it, and there was these private lenders that were working with this company who had a bunch of franchises across the country, and they were, I guess the company was telling the lenders like, oh, we'll take care of filing the lien, like, don't worry, you know. And I was kind of like, why would I rely on the borrower to take care of securing the loan on their own property? Like, it's in their best interest for it not to be secured, right? It's in my best interest as a lender to make sure that it's secured. So that is something that I should take responsibility for, right? But in this article, a bunch of private lenders essentially got scammed because they were relying on the borrower to record these liens. A lot of them were not recorded. A lot of these properties had multiple private lenders, and nobody was using title and escrow. Everyone was just relying on the borrower to record the liens. And so now, if you think about it, you got all these lenders and it's unclear who's first in line, and it was just a mess. I don't remember the title of that video that I made, but you should go check it out. It's actually really scary. You can prevent this by using the proper team members. Just engage a good title company, engage a good escrow company early on. You can pass those costs onto the borrower, or if that's not feasible, you can split the cost with the borrower and make it happen that way, right? There's no need to create risk where that can be mitigated, right? So those are the first 5 terrible habits of private money lenders that I'm seeing these days. And again, these are habits, you know, that people, they get used to operating this way, and this becomes just how they run their business, and that just creates unnecessary risk, really, because at the end of the day, if your money is out with someone else and it's not protected, it's not secured, you have no recourse. I mean, I'm not gonna say no recourse, but you have little recourse. And you know, next time we'll talk about some even more egregious, terrible habits that I've seen. It gets deeper, but for now, let's just avoid those. And I invite you to think about, you know, how you are with family and friends, if that's something that you've considered doing. This is one of the most difficult ones that I've seen. Like really people struggling with being able to enforce the rules that they've set out because it is a family member or because it is a friend. Honestly, I just don't even want to go down that road. But if that's something you're thinking about, I would really think about and imagine and visualize in your mind, like, can I see myself enforcing? Can I see myself going to court and suing, you know, my brother, you know, my cousin, whatever? Like, think about it. Can you actually imagine that? And how does that make you feel? Will you be able to go through with it? Because that might be how it is. But I would say that is like the biggest takeaway here. Avoid these habits, develop best practices for your lending business, and you can stay safe. You can keep your money safe.